Streaming services are on the rise, and brick-and-mortar video stores are a thing of the past. We have lost that experience of wandering the aisles and stumbling upon a film we've never heard of. We have replaced the familiar face behind the video store counter with an algorithm to recommend films. With more and more content available, it's harder to know what's worth watching and what might be a waste of your time. There are many hidden gems out there waiting to be discovered, and we want to help you find them. This is Trailer Rewind, a podcast where we discuss and review recently forgotten or overlooked films that are now available to stream at home. Today we are talking about Papillon 2017. This is our final film in a trio. Each film has a one-word title that is the name of the main character, and you can find our discussion on Tesla and The Loose at truestory.fm, or you can subscribe to the show on your podcatcher of choice for the full catalog of Trailer Rewind episodes. Today is April 3rd, 2021, and Papillon is available on Amazon Prime and Canopy.
I love you.
Say that again.
You're under arrest for the murder of Roland LeGrand.
You got the wrong guy, pal. I was with her all night.
Come on, let's go. Annette!
This is a frame-up.
Hey, Papillon, right? Got any money? Get some. Never escape without it.
Louis Degas. Guy's a millionaire. Won't last long.
You got a lot of eyes on you, my friend. For a little bit of that money you're carrying, I could keep you safe.
Keep me alive. I'll underwrite any escape you care to arrange.
Something tells me you can be quite savage.
You are the property of the penal administration of French Guiana.
There's no way off.
There's always a way.
So, JJ, this was a film that did not find its audience in theaters.
Yeah, I don't know if it's found its audience anywhere just yet, is what I would say about it. Because I didn't even know about it, and then I see, who's in it and what it's all about, and I'm like, what the heck? Why didn't I know about this movie?
Right. Well, that's why we have it here on Trailer Rewind. It was released in 544 theaters back in August of 2018. That was the U.S. release, and it spent about a month in theaters. Okay. It was also released internationally that fall, and with a few countries seeing releases in the spring of 2019. There was a good 6-month period where this was in theaters all across the world. And overall, the film made just over $2 million, with half of that coming from its U.S. release.
Yeah.
So not a lot of people in seats for this one. It became available digitally on October 30th, 2018, and on Blu-ray on November 6th, 2018. And I vaguely remember this trailer getting picked and completely forgot about it. This is just one that again, you mentioned the names, Rami Malek and Charlie Hunnam.
Yes.
And this was... I checked the calendar. So this was trying to pin it down to the time frame with Bohemian Rhapsody and all of that. So it was in production before, it was in production before that. Okay. So I don't think the hype had hit with all of that when this was in theaters. So it was, he wasn't as visible a name at the time this was in theaters.
So post Mr. Robot. But pre-Bohemian Rhapsody is what we think.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And Charlie Hunnam has just been one of these that he's been in a lot of little things. He was in The Gentleman that we talked about on the film board.
Yeah.
He was in Pacific Rim, but he's never come across as, a leading man that I think is going to draw people in based on his name and his presence.
I don't know. He's a stunning looking human being. I'll just say that. And this is the first time that I've ever seen him without a beard. He's shorn in the early part of this movie.
Right.
And I was shocked. I didn't even recognize him without that because the thing that I had heard about him first was Sons of Anarchy, but he's been around in a bunch of different things. And I think, we're going to get more into the performances later and stuff like this, but I think this is something serious that he's doing to show how it's different from everything else that's out there in the world that he's been doing. So
Yeah, well, these two had big shoes to fill. So I do want to say we're before we get into this film, I want to let everyone know this is a review of the 2017 film. We're reviewing it on its own. We're not going to be doing a comparison to the 1973 film with Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman. Those are huge shoes to fill. And I think looking at this project on its own, what it was trying to accomplish is the best way to look at this. The other is heralded as a classic. So I think let's look at this one and what it tries to do and what it does well and the performance of these characters. What I knew going in was that this was going to be a prison break movie. And although that is part of the story, to me, by the end, I felt like that's not what this film's really about. And so I was sort of disappointed because I wanted more of the edge of your seat suspense of, are they going to make it? Are they not? And it's not really so much about the escape attempts. And there are several of those. But for me, I came away a little disappointed with this film. Now, I've had time to think about it. I had a discussion with my wife. We were talking about, she enjoyed it far more than I did. And so we had some discussion about it. But how did it hit you on your first viewing?
Well, for me, so I thought it was going to be, really focused on the prison break aspect of it too. But it turns out to me that it really reminds me something that it's more about the human limits and human tragedy. And it really kind of based on this sort of Devil's Island and these places that these criminals from this period are placed. It really reminds me more of a thing where you're looking to watch the depths of human perseverance, human suffering. And so it reminds me more of a movie like Castaway or 127 Hours or something like this, where that's really the focus of the film. And so that's something right away that we should talk about, that if you're looking for something in this film, you shouldn't come to this with that prison break. I think you and I both had that same sort of misconception. It's more about, learning about sort of the limits of what humans can take and what humans go through and all that kind of stuff. It's, how you feel about that and how you feel about that kind of genre is going to really color your perception of how much you like this film, I think. It definitely did for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is the one piece of advice I would say. If you want a suspenseful, like Prison Break, heist movie, all of that, it's got a sequence or two where that is part of it, but it is really not the overarching sort of feel of the film. And so I'd say, yes, definitely definitely more an exploration, as you said, of sort of the limits of humanity. And it's really about the relationship of these two men over time and their own personal like moral compass, I would say. So it's much more of a character piece, which you would think with the name Papillon, which is our main character, it's his story. So it's not, the great French Guiana prison break movie. It's Papillon. So it's story of a man and the journey that he goes on. So yes, if you haven't seen either of these films, this or the original, just know going in, this is not the prison break film. So given that, where did you find this sort of on as an overall rating, and ranking? Where did this one land for you?
Well, for me, it ends up ranking kind of low. And I think because of that, it's because of that genre aspect of it. I don't particularly enjoy doing that sort of journey with a character unless I'm personally invested in it. I had a lot of trouble with Castaway. So that's the movie that I kept thinking about throughout this. And, And you wouldn't think, there isn't a lot of similarity in the fact that, we're talking about a prison versus a deserted island, but there is a lot of solitary and, focusing on Papillon and a character, you really are going into this person in the way that it kind of happens in Castaway too, where you learn about what changes can happen to a person based on these sort of things they persevere through. So this sort of film is not super, it's not something that I go to see or thing, again, unless I'm invested in the story, invested in the character and that kind of stuff. And I wasn't in particular invested in this character. So I gave it, but that being said, I found the film to be stunningly beautiful. I thought that the way it was shot, and there was a lot of really interesting things done there. So I actually give it sort of an interesting, just middle of the road rating. I think it's a fine film. And if you like this kind of movie, you're going to like it. So I gave it a 2.5 stars, but it's a not like for me. And then on my flick chart, it ends up ending up pretty low. It goes down to like 224 out of 249 because again, every time I bumped up against a movie that I kind of liked, it ended up it ended up losing. So it ends up really low on that list. But so I have it just below Ready Player One, which was a Film Board movie, and just above Cloud Atlas. And that seems just about right for me when I think about this film. Again, it feels like a film that was made in a superior way, but a story that I just wasn't interested in and didn't really end up caring about because I was just sort of I became desensitized to the tragedy as we went forward. How did you feel about it?
Okay. Yeah, I think we're very much in the same place. However, in my post-viewing discussion, as we say here at the next reel, when the movie ends, the conversation begins. My wife and I immediately began a conversation about this movie. And so based on that conversation, I sort of came up a little bit. So I was probably at, as credits started to roll, I was at 2.5 stars. I'm now at 3 due to that conversation. And it comes in at 327 out of 713, which is right about in the middle. It's about 54%. It ends up in a strange place. So 2 spots above it is a Trailer Rewind film we talked about, Free Fire.
Yes.
Which is at 325. You know, again, a film that, there are things that work, there are things that don't. And then just below it, 2 spots below it is, I don't know if we did the first one on the Film Board. I think we did the second one, but the first Jack Reacher is at 329.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
So
see, I really liked the first Jack Reacher a lot, but then the second one was a huge disappointment for me. So So those are sort of the films I've got. It's really sandwiched between 2 other really strange movies that I watched recently, which is just above Papillon is this really, really intense film that you should by no means ever watch called We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is based on a book. It's John C. Reilly, Tilda Swinton, and it's this whole school shooting thing. JJ, stay away. Yeah. And then just below it at 328 is a film called Pushover, which is a film noir that I've watched over on the Criterion Channel with Fred McMurray, and it was all right. So it sort of falls into that middling range of 3-star. Of there's things like
that work well.
Spot for you.
Yeah, it is. It's in that zone of in the middle, so it doesn't stand out as anything great. It's not something that ultimately frustrated me. It just sort of is in that forgettable zone of, I saw it, and if you ask me in a couple of years, I'll say I remember a couple things, but ultimately, not a whole lot to remember.
I'm going to say that about Papillon. That's that little anecdote. That's exactly how I'm going to feel about Papillon, unfortunately.
So over on Letterboxd, it does have an average review of 3.4 based on 15,600 reviews. So
that's good.
I would say that's it's right around in that 3-star range. So definitely one that I think people enjoy watching. But however, again, nothing that's aspiring to greatness.
7.2 stars on IMDb. So
7.2 on IMDb, which is really high.
Yeah, it's a high side.
Typically, that is the high side. So I'm curious to see, maybe dig into some of those reviews, see what people really think about that. But listeners, if you think that this is your kind of film and don't want anything spoiled, this is your chance to pause the podcast and check out Papillon over on Amazon Prime and Canopy. All right, JJ. So this film that neither of us had, a strong reaction to. I mean, I felt like it was very much in that, I watched it. Type of camp. So I thought, well, let's look at what's going on in this film, because it's really the story of this gentleman thief who is framed for a crime he didn't commit because he pocketed some jewels for a heist he was paid for. So he's, I don't know that I would call him a Robin Hood, because he's not robbing from the rich to give to the poor. He's robbing from the crooks to build a better life for himself and his woman.
Yes.
That sort of, sets things into action. So I think that's one of my big struggles is we've got a guy who's wrongfully framed, for this crime, but he's still a criminal. So I have to, all throughout this, I thought, well, he's in prison, but he's a criminal. Maybe it's definitely more severe than what he probably deserves, but I have to think about why am I rooting for this guy to get out of prison? If this is a prison break film, where's the injustice that needs to be, righted with this? So. And
in review, so when I watched it, I thought the whole sequence jail, right? So pre going to French Guiana, when he's living up, I guess is it the Roaring 20s? It has that vibe, right?
20s or 30s, yeah.
20s or 30s, and he's he's living it up, and he's choosing this these difficult things. It's a well shot sequence. It's really beautiful. Everything's lit really well. It's really exciting and all these things. But ultimately, it's really irrelevant to the story. It doesn't really tell us anything about him as a character in regards to what the bulk of the movie is about. So it ends up being really frivolous to me, where I thought a lot about this character and all of this pre-story, but really it didn't need the time that they spent on it. It felt like maybe it's 10, 12 minutes. I'm just throwing out an average here or a guess, but
yeah.
But I really expected much of the time when we get to what's going on in the prison for some sort of hearkening back to it based on the attention and the sort of the creativity that was given to it. And other than a fever dream later on in Solitary, there is no real connection to that aspect of his life. So it felt very separate from the subject matter that the rest of the film takes on. And if it is a biopic, which, it's based on a book that is, they give the sort of detail at the end, based on a true story and based on a book that's one of the greatest selling, nonfiction books of all time in France, which I think is wonderful. But if it is about this person's character, I don't know that we needed that much time on it. I could have understood, that he's framed and that he's, wrongfully sent away in, 3 minutes or less, as far as the importance for the rest of the film. So yeah, I understand that, we's got to be the cat that, we're going to save the cat, but there's just so much that's going in there to establish something that I don't think needs to actually be established.
Exactly. I thought we spent all this time with his girlfriend and their relationship and their dream of where they she has this dream of like the small place out in the country, but he, what am I going to do? I work in the city. So there's all this about where their future is going to be. And that she just disappears.
Yep.
The same thing with the crime boss who frames him. I thought, okay, if this is going to be about corruption, then does this, crime boss have ties to the police, the military, anything to show that there's this, someone's pulling the strings to make his life miserable other than just framing him. But yeah, we spent all that time meeting these characters, getting to know this world, and it's practically irrelevant other than the fact that setting up that he's arrested for something he did not do.
Right.
And that puzzled me because I thought something is driving him to escape, because that's, from the point he's arrested, he wants to get out. Is it for revenge on the crime boss? Is it to get back to his life that he wanted to have of this domestic life with his girlfriend? I have no sense of either of those being a driving force for him to get out. There's no ticking clock. There's no connection to anything back in Paris.
In Act 1, you could guess any of those things that you just said, but by the time we get to Act 3, it's something different entirely, and that's the difficulty with the through line of the story here. I would love to again see the classic that you're talking about with McQueen and whatnot, or even read the book, but this film didn't connect those acts in a way that would allow us to understand that story, unfortunately.
No, but what I think, what happens next is once he's in prison, he hears that he's going to the penal colony, and one of his fellow prisoners is a man named Louis Degas, who's a famous counterfeiter. He's a millionaire. He's been caught. He's also going there, and it's the thought of, if I'm going to have an escape plan, it's going to cost money. This guy has money. So I'm going to do everything I can to befriend and protect him. So that's sort of Papillon's, mode of operating right there.
Yeah.
This guy's my ticket out of here. So I'm going to do everything I can. And so it's really about the relationship between these two men early on. It in some ways, it reminds me of a romantic comedy where you've got You've got that lie at the core of the relationship that suddenly blows up of like, you weren't really interested in me. Well, I wasn't. I was just using you, but now I really care about you. It sort of felt like that of, I'm just using Louis to, I don't care about this guy. I've just got to keep him safe.
Yeah.
I'm going to protect him on the boat till we get to the island. I'm going to do these things so that I can get his money. And
I didn't
Louis
think of it that way, but it totally works
Right.
for a rom-com.
Right. Louis got his own plan. His wife is working with an attorney on the outside. He's figuring, I'm going to be out of here by Christmas. No.
Right.
Not going to happen. So then once we get to the penal colony, that sets up our world that we're going to be living in for the bulk of the movie. We get, it's because I love high school movies, we get that orientation, right? Of like, everybody's there. Here's the rules. Here's the people. Here's this. Here's the guards. Here's the mean guards that are gonna, we're gonna see throughout the film. We get a sense of that world, and it does a very good job of establishing, this wilderness, penal colony. There's no opportunity to escape. The bush will kill you. You'll starve to death. If you try to get out in the ocean, you're going to drown. Sharks, all of that stuff. Don't even try escaping. We get the rules. The first time you escape, you're going to get sent into solitary confinement for 2 years. The second time, you're going to get 5 years, and then you're going to be exiled to Devil's Island for the remainder of your, sentence. But as we learned before they were shipped out, that basically they are no longer French citizens, that they will serve out their term of their sentence. And when their sentence is over, they're going to remain there basically to work over there. So they are not, there's no opportunity to return home. So
Right.
I guess that may be the thing that motivates Papillon a little bit. It's not just about serving out his sentence. Even if he does serve it out, he doesn't have an opportunity to come back.
It's so confusing too in today's world. I shouldn't even say in today's world, but to not understand the role of the colonizing Western Europe, right? As Western Europe was exploring the Western Hemisphere, these kind of things that they did, and it's just so baffling to me to be like, what are they going to do? Like, what are they doing with their time? Why do they send these people to do this? But it's just another form of slave labor, right? It's just like taking advantage of people to use them as slaves and their lives. That's one thing that they hammer home in this film, that the lives of these prisoners meant nothing to anyone. What's a line that the warden says one time is, he says something as though you're no value to us, and it's no problem for us to kill you, this kind of thing. And he says it much more poetically than I did, but this kind of thing, when they kill Papillon's first kind of person that he interacts with the guillotine. He says that sort of thing, and it's really stark to watch how humanity is just erased from these people because of some crime that they've been accused of or that they've committed. So it's pretty terrible.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And that beheading is actually sort of the impetus for the first escape attempt, because Papillon recognizes one of his cellmates, I guess from back in Paris, who told him about the guy, and this is the guy that, as they're on the boat, like, takes the knife, cuts his leg so that he can be hospitalized.
Yes.
Cuts his own leg so that he can be hospitalized, because that's his plan for escape that he puts into action right away. So when he gets caught and is marched in, everybody's in the courtyard kneeling. Papillon stands up because he recognizes the guy, which, the warden, that catches his eye. So when the beheading happens, Papillon now, because the warden has, singled him out, said, okay, you pick somebody, you're going to carry the body. So, of course, the deal that Papillon and Degas have is that they're always going to stay together. So they get tasked with carrying this body out into the jungle, because Degas is, the bookish type and not physically fit. He's always exhausted, always worn out.
Right.
Plus he's grossed out. He's just flat grossed out because he's got the top end of the body.
Why did they give the top end to Degas?
Because it's seeping through.
The stump is going all over Degas. And that feels like the heavy end of the body to me. I don't understand. You get the ankles and I'll get the wrists. Like, I don't understand why they didn't work this out better. But that scene was frustrating for me.
Right. So, Degas drops the body. He starts getting whipped by one of the guards. Papillon, clubs him in the back of the head with a rock, and no one else is around. So he bolts. He finds the guy that he talked to earlier about a boat, but he has no money. He gets turned in, sentenced, to his 2 years of solitary confinement. And what I found very interesting is, it's while he's in this first sort of phase of his solitary confinement that we we get the context for what is actually the opening shot of the film. Because the opening shot of the film is a door in the prison, and a little, sort of smaller door inset opens up. We see Papillon back there. He walks up and sticks his head through the door and looks around. When we find that later on, when he's actually in, serving his solitary confinement, it's to get a haircut. And I thought, okay, so why is this the first scene in the movie? What is this? What was this trying to hint at? Was it to show the contrast between him being in prison at the very beginning as an opening shot, and then the flashback, technically, I guess, to him being a free man in Paris? I don't know. I was waiting to see when we get to that scene, because I thought, is this the first
turning point?
Prison Break? What is this? Yeah, is this a critical turning point for him? No, he gets a haircut. It's not even.
It's just a really good shot.
Moment of revelation.
It's just a really good shot.
I know.
I mean, from a filmmaking perspective, the way that they shot it, and the sort of the point of reference that you have of your main character being shot through this tiny hole, and then having his head come out and seeing his like fear and anticipation and anxiety and all this, and Charlie Hunnam does a great job of it. So they. I think that's why they front-ended it with that. There's no story reason for it. It's not, no. Why are they giving them haircuts anyway? But anyway, I don't know. I mean, they're not French citizens anymore, so they can be long hairs, right? Like, what's the deal?
Maybe, lice, fleas, that type of thing, perhaps, hygiene.
It's thoughtful.
Possibly.
I don't know.
But we do spend a bit of time, and I have to, give Charlie Hunnam credit, for carrying this movie. I mean, it is all him. When he's in solitary, we don't get any scenes with Degas, what's going back in camp. We get Papillon in solitary confinement.
And there's at least 15 minutes through his multiple runs of solitary where we are experiencing the world of Papillon without dialogue, without any sort of, and we're seeing him go through what he goes. That's where I get this sort of Castaway reference, right? Where we see him deteriorating. And I thought Hunnam was fantastic in it. I was really impressed. I don't know how to show that really, but he did it, and it was very intense. But again, that's not what I really wanted to see when I chose this movie. So I say 15 minutes, that's just a guess as well, but that's a lot of time to be spent without dialogue and without anything going on.
Yeah. Because we go from just the initial, he's there, the guard that he, clubbed on the head comes to, take his pound of flesh, beats him up. But right after that, he, in his buckets that come in, somebody is now sneaking him half of a coconut. So he's getting a little extra nourishment. So we see that he starts his physical exercise regimen. He's going to stay fit. And then, that gets taken away from him because he's not going to, they find out about the coconuts. He won't, reveal who did it. And this is the thing that I love about the character of Papillon, because solitary confinement it's silent. They're not supposed to talk. So when they come to interrogate him, he's just putting his finger to his lips, not going to talk. He's not going to squeal. So they cut his rations back. He still won't talk. They put him in darkness. So he goes from being physically fit and wanting to maintain himself to just the shell of a man by the end of that. He is, skin and bone. He has this, fever dream moment that shows me bits and pieces of Paris, Degas acting like a mime, and some other things. And while visually interesting, doesn't tell me anything other than he's, delusional.
I can only imagine that it was part of the book.
Right.
Because it's not purposeful in the story, other to say that he's so far gone that he's having delusions now. That's right. That's all that it's there for.
Yeah. Right. So then when he gets back, we automatically kick into like second escape attempt. This is the more complex, many moving parts, many people, huge scheme. We've got to drug the guards. The movie, they're going to be showing a movie. We've got to drug the guards. We've got to get through. We're going to turn off, the lights will be out because of the movie. We've got to sneak along here. We're going to get to this place. There's a guy with a boat. So for me, that was the closest I got to that heist movie or the prison escape movie that I wanted of. The plans that they set, things going wrong, not quite how do they adapt, is everything going to work out, for them? That was, for me, like the peak of the movie. It worked really, really well for that. Of course,
Sure.
they do succeed in their escape. They get to the boat. On the boat, which is the tiniest boat that 4 guys could safely, well, not even safely be on, because it's got leaks, all of that. There's an argument. Degas kills a man on the boat, and the only reason I bring that up is because I think it's an important piece for his character later on. I'm assuming, because it's like the first like act of violence we actually see him commit. We've seen Papillon defend and stand up for and protect Degas all throughout. Lots of brawls in the showers, in the fields, all of this. Degas never, able to defend himself, and he finally does, and at the expense of a man's life. And I think there's some guilt that he carries for that action later on. But so they end up getting to, they shipwreck apparently, because Papillon wakes up and where are they? They're in Colombia, but that doesn't last long before they're captured again.
Turned in by nuns.
Yes, turned in by the nuns who wanted them to repent.
I don't think they really wanted them to repent. I just think they wanted them to be captured.
I think so. But there's an enlightening moment, because Papillon had the opportunity to escape, but came back to the main settlement to warn Degas, and Degas has this like moment of enlightenment of like, you came back for me. This, there's this now bond that they have of, I think Papillon feels still some responsibility, and it may be due to the coconut that he's pretty sure that's what, Degas was the one that paid to have sent him, but it's gone far beyond the, I'm just going to use you for the money to help me escape. There's now something deeper in this relationship between these two men at this point. Yeah. And that's where, so a second capture. So then we get 5 years of solitary, and then we get exiled to Devil's Island. By the time Papillon gets there, he is surprised to see that Degas is there. Degas was sent there because he leveraged his role as the warden's aide at the penal colony to assist with that escape attempt. The warden apparently didn't care for that and just sent him off. So that's where we wrap up the film, is with the two of them there, and Papillon figures out a way to get off the island. He watches the tides, and if you have a small raft, the tide will actually carry you away from the island. And so, what is it? Coconut shells and, in a big burlap
bottles,
bag. Yeah. There's all kinds of stuff. And so casts it off, jumps. Degas says he's not going to go with him. And for me, this is where I think it's perhaps that guilt of the murder that he thinks he deserves to stay there as a murderer.
I hadn't thought that. I think it's interesting to get that from you. I think that Degas has lost all of his religion, all hope of everything, and I think he was tired of fighting for something different, new, better, whatever. Yeah. And so he had found, he was cave painting, he was doing all these things. Yeah. He had found some sort of peace within himself to be there. And the line in the movie, which I think is great, he said, "I need to stay for the same reason you need to go. I need to stay." And I get that. I think this whole scene, and when we get to the big moment when we're on the ridge and having Papillon throw the raft, the makeshift raft over, and them, if you even make the jump and stuff, I think I was really supposed to be emotionally invested at this point, but I just really wasn't. I wasn't either. They were screaming at each other in joy, and that they finally found like each of their freedoms in one respect or another. But I just, it didn't play for me, and that was what I was really disappointed about. I think for anyone in the audience, for anyone to like this movie, you're going to have to care more deeply about each of these characters as they go through it, and I don't think that's easy the way this film is laid out. So that's why I referenced the 127 hours or Castaway, these things where you really have to go on the ride with these guys. And I just felt like a third person observer the whole time. And that's why it didn't connect for me personally.
Exactly. As soon as the movie ended, I thought, wait, he escaped. I should have been like, yes, and cheering, and this elation of like, after all these horrible things that have happened to him, that he's finally getting to his freedom. And I come back to, is it because I think, well, he's a crook, so even though he, was framed for something, but he's still, a criminal. But again, he does continue to redeem himself as a person. He's not selfish. He is this, protector of Degas, and that speaks to his moral character. So why do we not feel that? That was one of the things that really puzzled me and led to a conversation my wife and I had of like, what is this about? And she's, I said, why is it not resonating with me this way that I think it should, of he's free. That's supposed to be a happy ending. I'm not shouting in joy with them. And I started, we started talking about what is the message that we're supposed to be taking away from this? Is it not really about the prison break? Is it about Papillon and, fighting against corruption? And so he's finally able to escape the corrupt system. Is it about loyalty and friendship, and that by remaining true to Degas, he's actually earned this freedom? These are the sort of, threads that I'm trying to pull at to see what seems to be the emotional, arc I should be taking, or that the filmmakers want us to have in following Papillon.
Yeah, and this is where it kind of fails in a character piece, because we don't end up caring about them, and we get a little bit more instruction or guidance of what maybe the purpose was in the denouement, where Papillon travels back to France, even though he is at risk at a much older age, even though he is at risk of being, retaken into custody. And he says that he wants the book published. This is sort of the origin of this famous autobiographical book. He wants the book published because he wants to tell the story of all the men that went away to this prison. And so you get maybe it is more what you said first, which is corruption, or it is this sort of enslavement or this loss of humanity that all these people felt in the way that the French handled their penal colonies and stuff like that. So, but if that's the point, then I don't know that we connected those dots emotionally. And I think that's where it didn't work for me in that. And I'd be interested to see if the McQueen and Hoffman movie did that to some degree more. But I don't think that if we're following this script or this story that we're going to get there, because it moves in too many different ways so that we aren't with it in step emotionally, unfortunately.
I agree, because if it is really about him overcoming the corruption, it's really about him escaping it. There's nothing he does that, other than writing the book, which again, it says that, he outlived the whole penal colony system and all of that.
Yeah. But
we never see the consequences. We never see I guess that's the punishment of those that are corrupt. How do they that, made him miserable? We don't see them. There's no justice served other than he escapes and he publishes a book. And that's really hard, I think, to connect to emotionally, because we have these characters. We have the warden. We have the one guard that comes in to beat up Papillon during his first stint in solitary confinement. We never really see anything bad that happens to them. They don't, they're set up as, I guess, pawns within this huge system. But I think emotionally what we want in a story is this person represents that system, so we can get our vengeance, we can get our justice through something happening to that person, and we'll feel like vindicated of like, yes, he at least was able to get that accomplished. And we never see any of that. It's all about his escape. And again, that's where I wonder, is it trying to accomplish something different? But for me, it's not clear what the takeaway is, and perhaps because the first version of the film came out in 1973, and I think the book was like 1970, so it was right after that. So it was still very fresh in sort of this revelation of what this was. If that had more of an emotional resonance in the world with this story of pulling back the curtain on something that no one knew about, maybe that had a different context back in the 70s versus now just being so distanced from that. This isn't something that recently, was in the news, or something that, came to light of, we had this, the closest thing I can think of is something like The Report, that, is the torture report about everything that the CIA was doing. If it's supposed to have that type of cultural relevance, I think that's challenging to do,
from
50
an
years
emotional
later.
standpoint.
Yeah,
I wonder, I kind of connect it to something like Shawshank Redemption. And you
Yes,
think about
yeah.
that potentially, because the source material is based on a true story, that there's this sort of allegiance to what's in the source material, which, neither of us know, but telling the story in a creative way that would allow us to understand a different frame of reference and a different emotional standpoint, it would have been helpful in this. But instead, we have this sort of barrier, a journalistic barrier to what's happening because of the autobiographical nature of the story. Whereas in Shawshank, the narrator is Morgan Freeman, and he has a perspective. He has a personal perspective of being in prison. He has, the perspective of then the escape and what is truly freedom and what it means to be exonerated and what it means to, to find freedom and to experience the corruption when you're in the jail and yet still fight for your own freedom in this. And it's just told in a different sort of way because you have the freedom of fiction in the Shawshank Redemption.
Yes.
Whereas
Yeah.
here, I feel like because they're trying to stay true to something that, again, the first shot of the film is a card that says based on a true story. That's the first thing that we get here. So that tells you the sort of importance to the filmmakers of the biographical nature of this story. And I think Shawshank is a classic too. I mean, it's a movie that is well loved by everyone and totally deservedly so. But it has more of an emotional hit than anything in this movie, unfortunately, even while this is based on real life.
Yeah, and that is, I think, often the challenge of a true story, of the desire to stay true to the facts as they happened, as opposed to what is going to best work dramatically. And again, knowing that it's based on a novel, and I always have to think, how reliable is our narrator? How much are things, especially when he is a thief,
Yes.
how much is it exaggerated to make himself, look good? I don't know. But overall, I mean, there are so many solid moments to this. There are parts of this that I think that work in isolation. There are, again, it's beautifully shot. Charlie Hunnam's performance, I think I can see why he was attached to this project. This is something that featured role carrying the film. You've got those moments in solitary confinement there's no words. It's all in the physicality of that performance. And there are so few opportunities to do something like that. And unfortunately, whether it's in the editing or, I don't know where things went flat for this, because there are really excellent pieces, but overall, yes, the tone of it just left me feeling, with nothing really. I didn't have an emotional reaction to this, and I felt it deserved that from the long, torturous experience that Papillon goes through, that I wanted to be celebrating more than I did. But overall, if it's something that people are interested in, I would say, yeah, I'm not going to discourage you from watching. I think there are people that may connect with it or may find it, an enjoyable, entertainment for, 2 hours to pass some time, but clearly not something that I'm going to return to again. It has made me seek out, where can I find, the original, which apparently is, as of today, available on HBO Max. So I may have to check that out in the next week or two to do a little comparison to see what works so well in the 1973 version. If it's the performances, if there's differences in the story or structure that have led that to become the celebrated classic that it is.
Yep. I think, and I'm just scrolling through the IMDb reviews while you have here, and even though it has that high number at 7.2, the majority of the reviews are saying, just see the original. Just see the original. Okay. I mean, there was like a one-word review that said unnecessary. So
yeah, well, and that is the challenging piece. And yeah, I would say this is, that's accurate. It's not anything that I feel this is a must-see film by any stretch of the imagination. It's one that if I had never seen, I would not feel that I've missed out on anything. With this one. Anything in the cinematography? I mean, we do have that, that unique sort of fever dream sequence. We have the sort of hallucinated safe in the wall. Some interesting visuals in there, but I didn't know if there was any particular camera movements or things that caught your eye.
Well, all the wide stuff there isn't a whole lot of wide stuff in this movie, I'll say first of all. But the wide stuff that is shown when they are in the prison yard, looking up at the warden, and the movement that the camera does to show the volume of people there and how they're being treated, and all the movements there that kind of show this piece. I couldn't tell if it was, I looking at the credits, it looks like it was shot somewhere in like Croatia or something like that. But it looked like it was a location shoot, and they really took advantage of the sets through that stuff. So everything with the guillotine, everything that was in that yard, I think was really powerfully shot. And they really utilized the environment. When we get to Devil's Island, I thought everything showing that particular evil, scary place was very effective. The camera was very effective there. And when it got to that big decision-making point, even though I wasn't emotionally invested, as we get to the ledge that is really the boundary to freedom for these guys, that was really effective for me too. There's one particular shot where we go with Papillon as he walks to the edge, and the ocean, the blue of the ocean is really revealed to us by the camera. And I think that was really powerful. But in general, I think we could see more of that stuff. When it was used, it was effective, but most of the stuff is shot really tight and is really focused on the characters, which again, I think ended up being flat, unfortunately.
I say we, at least on, I feel like we're 1 for 3 on our, sort of single name, series
Agreed.
Here between Tesla, Loose, and Papillon. I'd say definitely of the 3, Loose is the must-see film.
It is, and I
bunch.
agree. I think it is a must-see. It goes into my trailer rewind bucket of this is one that people have to see if they're into that kind of movie, for sure.
Yes. Okay. Well, we'll see what happens in our next trio of films that we'll be delving into. But I want to thank everybody here for listening to Trailer Rewind. Anything we said here entertained, educated, or even enraged you, we'd like you to tell people about this podcast. Whatever your podcast listening platform is, please share, rate, or write a review. It helps other podcast listeners find us. Don't forget to join our online community with fellow movie lovers. Learn more at truestory.fm. And if you are interested in supporting us to help keep the lights on and get some great benefits while you're at it, head to truestory.fm/membership.
Yeehaw!
Hondo.